Alrighty, I'm going to declare the meeting officially started. Since we've been admitting people from the waiting room as they've shown up, there is no big flood of admittances now, but that's okay. Um, Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers for Thursday, August 21st. Uh, Tom Beland and Laurel Luby, our normal co-hosts, are allegedly asleep back east. They are on their annual back east trip, so they are not available. But Dion and Courtney Purcell have very generously and by surprise been asked and agreed to be stand-in meeting co-hosts. So if you're looking for help with the Zoom interface or whatever, you can chat with Dion and Courtney at the Purcells is their Zoom identifier, and otherwise we should be good to go. So a few quick announcements about this meeting. So this meeting is two parts. It's two little meetings kind of shoved together. The first one is just a kind of a birding gear review. It's not really an exhaustive treatment of the topic. It's more like my personal take on birding gear. And I'm very interested in getting input. So, if you get the notification from the Purcells, like, oh, you've been asked to unmute, feel free to unmute and feel free to interrupt and ask questions and interject. I'm looking to share more opinions about birding gear. I have a presentation I prepared where I kind of take a walk through my idea of if I were starting today, what birding gear would I look to acquire? And as I say, it's not an exhaustive discussion, and it is kind of me specific. It is the kinds of gear that I would get and use, and maybe some hot takes on things that I would not get that, if you disagree, that would be great. That would make for a more interesting meeting if we get some low grade controversy. So again, feel free to push back against my take on birding gear. That'll be the first half of the meeting, maybe 30 minutes or so of that. And then the second half of the meeting, we're going to talk about real bird content. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite species of birds, the bush tit. So you have that to look forward to. If you find the gear discussion dry or whatever, you got bush tits to look forward to, which is always exciting. Um, Couple of other quick announcements. So this Saturday, 2 days from now, there will be an outing of Carpinteria Birdwatchers at the Carpinteria Bluffs. We're not starting from the sort of main parking area that people think of for the Bluffs at Baylord Avenue. We are starting from the Viola Fields parking, just a little bit further east along Carpinteria Avenue. So we'll meet there at 8 a.m. on Saturday, and the plan is to kind of walk the coastal trail that goes east from there into the Rincon Bluffs Preserve, Rincon Bluffs Nature Park. I always forget what it's officially called now. The former planning commissioner in me thinks of it as Bluffs 3 because that's how it was in planning documents. But that's where we'll go on Saturday. It should be a lot of fun. As I say, we're starting at 8. Hopefully we can be quick before it gets too hot and muggy out, but we'll be close to the ocean anyway, which will give us some relief. And then another thing I wanted to just mention because I've been watching it, there's a kind of fun movie about birding that has just appeared on YouTube in the last few days. It's called Listers, A Glimpse into Extreme Bird Watching. And I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but I've watched about half of it and I'm really enjoying it. So I wanted to recommend it to people. There is a link to it from the web page for this meeting at carpbirdwatchers.org. Um, and in fact, there's links for all the stuff I'm going to be talking, all the gear and whatnot, will be in that same page at carpbirdwatchers.org. And I think it's fun. It's somewhat irreverent. It's I think from a really interesting perspective because it's these a couple of younger guys who did a big year last year, but did it as new birders. Like they didn't really know what they were doing, and it's just fun. Like they're into it enough that they're very respectful and they get the activity. Like they appreciate what's important about it. But they're also new enough to it that they kind of have what I think is a you know pretty amusing take on some of the weird personalities you run into when you're into extreme birding. And I find it legitimately funny, but also uh, very good bird content. They have good video of the birds they've seen, and they talk about them again in a sort of irreverent and amusing way. There's some bad language if you're sensitive to that stuff. It's a younger generation. They have a different attitude towards these things. Anyway, that's enough about that. Um, okay, so I think that is everything I had to announce. Uh, Anybody who has taken the plunge and unmuted, do you have any fun birding of your own, any recent birding of your own to share? I'll give a 5 to 10 seconds here where we can entertain input before I launch into the gear discussion. Since I have you on screen, I'm gonna bug the Purcells. Like, have you guys been doing any fun birding lately? Have you been getting out?
Actually, we have. We've been recently spending a lot of time in Madera Canyon outside of Tucson, which is renowned for outstanding birding. And so we have elegant trogons and all kinds of really fantastic stuff.
Are you actually in Arizona now?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
we bought a house about 25 minutes away from Madera Canyon. So we've been spending a lot of time down here.
was the local birding part of your decision on where to buy?
Yes, we'd heard plenty about Tucson birding. Yeah, and it hasn't
Yeah.
disappointed. It's been really, really excellent.
That is exciting. Well, maybe we can get you to give a little Arizona birding travelogue in a future meeting. You had that great, talk on birding in Asia that I really enjoyed.
Well, thanks, Sean. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
We'll talk about that later, offline. I won't put you on the spot. Was there anybody else who wanted to jump in? Going once. If you're trying to communicate and you're unable to message the Purcells in the Zoom chat, you should have access to that, and they can assist you. But in the meantime, I'm going to go on then and jump into our first topic, which is birding gear in 2025. And for that, I need to share my screen. So let me do that. And I want to do it like that, and that, and that. And let's do it this way. Put this over here. Sorry, I should have been more organized with this, but I'm going to move things around on my screen so it makes more sense to me. Okay, if I've done all this correctly, you should now be seeing the slide with a bunch of kids with binoculars. So thumbs up. Excellent. Thank you. So yeah. Uh again, I talked about this a little bit, but my take on this is that I think of, birding is everybody's birthright. I began birding as a pretty young person and got a lot out of it and have gotten more out of it over the years. And definitely want to make the case that you can enjoy birding and participate in birding and bird watching in a full and meaningful way with minimal investment. So it is not necessary to devote lots of money or have access to a lot of disposable income for birding gear. I'm talking about gear, and some of it is pricey. So some parts of this discussion might seem sort of exclusionary in that way, but I don't intend for it to be that way. Again, I think there are low cost options for birding that are definitely there for those who want to pursue it in that way, and I encourage that. So let me just go ahead and start talking about the items of gear. This is again what I would advise myself if I were starting off today. What advice would I give myself about what stuff to get in order to go birding? And the first thing I would suggest to myself is you need a pair of binoculars. Like that's really the one thing I think you really need to have. And these on the screen are certainly not the most ideal binoculars, but I would argue that you could actually have a very enjoyable time birding, even with binoculars as low end as these. And in fact, I have memories when I started birding, it was with whatever old binoculars were kicking around our house. And I had a grand old time. I didn't, miss not having better binoculars because I was having too much fun seeing the birds. So yeah, you can get cheap binoculars if you're motivated, and if that is, where you're at in terms of your budget, great. Get some cheap binoculars and go birding because there's a lot of fun to be had. Um, as you sort of move up the scale into making, you know, a financial investment, I would certainly recommend that you take whatever your birding budget is, especially if it's on the lower end, and dedicate as much of it as you're comfortable with to your binoculars. Um, there are a lot of, birding specific binoculars out there available, and there are some really good values. I'm a big fan of Vortex optics, which is why I've stuck some Vortex binoculars on the screen here. Um, they are, I think of them more as like hunting and general outdoors stuff as sort of their target market. And I think that makes for a little bit of a maybe more affordable approach to their product line. I am not super deep pockets when it comes to my birding activity. And so I appreciate that, that they offer good value. There are, certainly more expensive binoculars. There's a whole range of Vortex binoculars. And I guess the one other thing I should say, if I'm hyping Vortex, is I love their warranty. They will fix or replace your binoculars, no questions asked. The one thing you're not protected against is theft. But if you have the binoculars in any form and you ship it off to them, they will return them to you repaired or replaced to their full original condition at no cost. And I appreciate that. I've taken advantage of it more than once. So I'm a big fan. The Diamondbacks that I've shown here, and these prices are just what I found, just Googling quickly. There are links to where I got these prices from, again, in that webpage at carpbirdwatchers.org. Uh, you know, you can get used binoculars and save a substantial amount for all these pieces of gear. If you're willing to go used, you can save, 30%, 40%, even more sometimes. Um, this is sort of a like, the middle of their product line. They have more expensive binoculars. They have less expensive binoculars. I think if you're willing to spend $100 or so, you should be able to get some pretty nice binoculars for birding, certainly better than I started off with, and certainly you'll get binoculars that you'll be happy with. But you will be happier if you can spend more. And the thing with binoculars is, you know, they can get very expensive. There are, $1,000 binoculars. There are $2,000 binoculars. Um, and if you're in a optics shop or a birding store, someplace where you can get your hands on a pair, or another birder in the field will let you look through their high-end binoculars. I certainly encourage you to take a look through them and see what you're missing out on if you don't have binoculars that nice, and you will notice the difference. Uh, it's not just it's not just for fancy price tags. They're better binoculars are in fact better. But again, for what I would consider a pretty reasonable investment, you can get very nice birding binoculars. I'm a fan of the 8x42. The first number is the magnification, the second number is the diameter of the objective lens, the more distant lens. So, a bigger objective lens gives you more light gathering power, but it also makes the binoculars heavier. Higher magnification is better generally, although the downside is as the magnification goes up, the field of view gets smaller, so it's harder to get the bird in your field of view, and it's harder to hold the binoculars steady. There are birders I know who swear by their 10 power binoculars. Other birders are happier down with 7 power binoculars. I'm kind of an 8 power binocular guy is sort of my sweet spot that I like the best. Um, and then on the topic of binoculars, I want to mention another thing, which is taking care of the binoculars and specifically taking care of the lenses. And I have learned this lesson the hard way. So whatever amount you can invest in your binoculars, it is very much in your interest to keep the lens coatings in as good a condition as you can. A lot of the performance of a modern pair of good birding binoculars comes from, the optics and the lenses and the prisms and the construction, but also from the coatings that they put over the surface of the lenses. And those coatings are relatively soft and they're easily scratched. So what happens is, as you are out in the field and your binocular gets dirty and you said, oh, my binoculars are dirty, I want to clean them off. If you clean them carelessly. If you do what I have done too many times in my past of just taking your, your shirt and kind of wiping it, blow on it and wipe it off, um, don't do that. It's not good. It's not smart because what'll happen is, yeah, you'll clean them off, but you will also scratch the coatings with whatever sort of grit is on your shirt or on the lens. Um, so these days, my approach to binocular lens cleaning is kind of obsessive, but I think worth the obsessing. So what I have done is I have a lens cleaning kit like the one shown on the left here, and it's got your little puffy air thing to blow stuff off the lens. It's got your soft brush to brush things off the lens. It's got some other stuff. Um, and the process I will go through is I will wait until I really feel like I need to clean those lenses. Like I won't clean them just at the drop of a hat. Like a dirty lens can be cleaned. A scratched lens is basically scratched forever or until you exercise uh, your vortex, repair policy, um, which is kind of a hassle in and of itself. So uh, I try not to clean them until I need to, and then when I do, it's basically like a three-step process. And step one is to take the little blowy thing or blowing with my, mouth if I don't have access to the little blowing bellows. Hold the binocular so the lens is upside down and blow up on it. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to dislodge anything you can get off that lens before you actually start like physically, brushing it. So do that for the lens, then take your soft brush and very gently brush again with it inverted so stuff will fall off rather than collecting on the lens. Brush off whatever you can brush off lightly and gently. And only then go on to the wiping phase. And again, the wiping phase is sort of the crucial part where you will scratch the lenses if you're not careful. Um, these lens cleaning kits come with these magic fiber cloth or microfiber cloth. Don't use the microfiber cloth. Go with the single-use lens wipes that you can buy. They come in a little packet and you rip them open, you take it out. You've got no grit guaranteed on that. It's pre-moistened. Give a gentle wiping of the lens. Again, you're not trying to polish it. You're not trying to scrub it. You're just, gently removing whatever you can remove without a lot of rubbing. And do that every so often as you need to. Keep the lenses capped when not in use so you limit the buildup of gunk. And your coatings will last a good long time and you will really appreciate it. It makes a big difference. Like I've noticed, especially when you're looking at a backlit bird. So there's a bird on the branch and there's sun is beyond it so that you're seeing the bird silhouetted. With a good set of unscratched coatings on a good set of binoculars, you can see a lot of detail on that bird. But with scratched up lenses from overly aggressive cleaning, you will have a hard time seeing much detail at all. You'll just see a lot of fuzz and flare from all those scratches picking up the backlighting. So that's my rant about lens cleaning. Um, uh, I don't want to just talk, myself motor mouthing the whole time. Does anyone have any input they want to share? Any commentary before we move on from binoculars? Do you want to make a case for your higher magnification binoculars or any particular brand you're really happy with that you want to put in a plug for? This is an opportunity for you to share.
John, this is Lori Gaskin.
Hey, Lori.
Hi. And I just wrote in the comments, I just transitioned maybe about 6 months ago from middle of the road binoculars to Swarovski. And I tell you, my life has just changed dramatically. So I echo what you said. Birding is such an accessible endeavor. At the same time, to the extent you possibly can, it makes the endeavor so much more enriching to have a tool that allows you to get that much closer to the birds. So just
Yeah.
just a thought.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's why I think, regardless of whatever budget someone is at, I would say, the bulk of that budget should go towards your binoculars, at least initially, because that's the tool you're going to be using all the time. And that's the one you're going to get that benefit from all the time. And a nice set of binoculars really is nice. Like maybe you didn't have, if you're like me and you started off as a kid with these old beat up things that were out of alignment and you couldn't even look through both barrels at the same time. You had to close one eye. Um, maybe you would appreciate it more, but yeah, good binoculars are definitely worth whatever you can afford to, because that experience will be better.
So
Okay.
John,
Yeah.
uh, I went to an optician the other day about glasses because a friend's lenses were smeared. And so she'd bought some wipes that are similar to this. All they say is alcohol and I'm throwing air quotes, detergent on the wipes. And so I asked them, I said, is this okay to use if you have coatings on your lenses? And they said, no, because they've been known to smear. So you have not obviously had a problem with smearing, I guess, because you'd probably say so. But I'm just throwing that out that I'm a little hesitant to use anything
Yeah.
with the
Well, I have not had a bad experience using basically these Zeiss wipes on my
okay. All right.
binoculars. But I'm just some random guy. I don't have. If you want to go with the special lens cleaning cloth, that's certainly an option. I would encourage you to clean the cloth, like to run that thing through the
Mm-hmm.
laundry and get all the dirt and grit that you can out of it. Because that was a mistake I made in the past where I didn't use my shirt anymore, but I used the special cloth. But then I was just accumulating gunk on the cloth, and pretty quickly it was basically an abrasive thing that I was doing to the coatings. So
Mm.
yeah,
Okay. Very
I think
good.
if people are careful, just think about it, because if you it's the like the me of the past who just wasn't thinking about it is the person who had to learn the hard way and then realize after the fact, like, oh, these binoculars are not as the performance is not as good as it used to be, and then had to realize, yeah, that's because I messed up the coatings. Okay, well, I'm going to move on. But thank you both for that input. That is very helpful. So one other piece of binocular related paraphernalia, David and Linda Blue uh, turned me on to these. This is the Rick Young Outdoors binocular harness. And after you spend all that money on your binoculars, it maybe seems a little silly to fork over another $30 when the binoculars come with a perfectly good, neck strap, or maybe you have a harness that goes around the shoulders rather around your neck. Big fan. I'm a big fan of the harness that goes around your shoulders. It is more comfortable for long, sessions. Um, but these Rick Young, these thin little elasticy things, they look like they wouldn't be comfortable, but I really love them. They are great. And, when you're out there birding, when it's really windy sometimes, the sort of conventional harnesses with the wider webbing can start flapping in the breeze, and that's kind of annoying because it introduces, shaking. And these do not do that. And they're just very easy to adjust. And again, I really like them. I would not go back having switched to them. But your mileage may vary. I'm gonna move on from binoculars though. Oh, and talk about the other thing that I think everyone should pretty much have if they're starting out, which is a field guide, which is, a book with the birds in it. And these days you could argue that you don't even really need a field guide. There are other options, apps that I'll talk about in a minute that maybe supply that need and are free. But at least for myself, this may partly just be me being sort of old school. Um, back in the day when this was your only source of identification help, uh, I really appreciated having a book that I could page through when I wasn't out in the field and kind of acquaint myself with the different birds. Um, these two, the Sibley field guides and the National Geographic field guides to the birds of North America, are probably two of the most uh, well-respected, highly thought of. I am a Sibley guy. I like my Sibley field guide. Um, I actually, for reference, I will use the big Sibley, the one that covers all of North America. It's really too big to carry comfortably in the field. The smaller Sibley, which is the Western Sibley I have on the screen there, is easier to carry. And you know, these days I don't actually carry a field guide with me when I'm in the field. But I think when you're starting out, it can be really helpful because the apps really don't give you as much visibility that you can get if you actually have some pages open and you can page through and look for birds that match the bird you're looking at. Um, so yeah, I'm pro Sibley. The National Geographic Field Guide is kind of interesting. So, as part of kind of becoming a more avid birder and running into more people and just interacting with them, I have discovered there are people who really don't like Sibley and really prefer the National Geographic Guide, specifically, at least in the one case that I'm thinking of, because the text of the National Geographic Guide is more extensive and more helpful, more detailed. Sibley's text is pretty minimal. And the Nat Geo guide has more information about distribution of subspecies. At least historically, it has had that. So this cover that's on the screen is the 6th edition. There is a 7th edition that came out after that. That is an upgraded version of this same book. But now the 8th edition is coming out, and I think the East and Western versions, Eastern U.S. or Eastern North America, Western North America editions have come out. And I think the all-in-one version, which is the one that would basically replace this one that's on the right side of the screen here, is going to come out within the next month. And it is a pretty extensive rewrite, and it has sparked a certain amount of controversy. I wouldn't think there'd be controversy around a field guide update, but there is. It's a different approach, and it's done away with a lot of the maps and replaced them with maps derived from the eBird data. I believe a lot of the text has been rewritten. I'm not sure if the illustrations have been updated or not. I'm really not familiar with it, so I'm hesitant to recommend it, but I am a big fan of the 6th and 7th edition, the previous editions, which I still like having as a supplement to the Sibley guide. Um, you know, uh, Here's sort of this is what the inside of the Sibley guide looks like. And, for me, the thing that really pushes me, if I had to pick just one, the reason why I would pick Sibley's is I think his illustrations really are on a different level from every other field guide, or almost every other field guide I've seen. And his text is pretty minimal, but very useful in its condensed form. The Nat Geo illustrations are done by multiple different illustrators, and they're all, great illustrators. It just doesn't quite have that level of, uh, I don't know, uh, that je ne sais quoi. There's something about the Sibley illustrations that really, to my eye, just look like the bird in a way that other field guide illustrations sometimes fall short of, and I appreciate that. Um, anyway, go to a bookstore, go to your Chaucer's, go to your local, bookstore and browse through any decent bookstore will have an extensive field guide section. Find the one that works for you. Find the one that resonates with you, um, and pick it up. Okay, so moving on, and I'm just not gonna pause for more field guide discussion. I would be interested if people get the new Nat Geo guide and have thoughts about it, or if you've already picked up the regional version of it and have thoughts about it. That would be worth sharing about maybe. Um, but in the meantime, I'm going to move on. So this is the Sibley Birds app, which is $20 for the iPhone version. I don't know about the Android version. I assume it's similar. Um, it is basically the illustrations from the Sibley guide and the text from the Sibley guide and the range maps. It's super convenient having that in my pocket at all times, which is why I no longer feel the need to carry a field guide with me in the field. The downside is, it's like a little tiny window on the content. If you've got a book open in front of you, you can see a lot of stuff. If you're looking at the field guide, if you're looking at the app on your phone, it's kind of like looking at that field guide through a little tube. You only see a little piece of it at a time. But as you gain experience, you're not even really consulting the field guide all that often, except on trickier points, so it probably doesn't matter. And for me, the convenience outweighs everything else to be able to just always have it with me. There are other apps. I don't have experience with them, so I'm not going to talk about them. I mean, I'm sure there's some really good ones out there. A couple of other apps that I am experienced with and I will recommend in a big way are Merlin and the eBird app. These are two different apps from the Cornell Labs. I think all of you are probably familiar with them, but if you aren't, you certainly should be. Merlin is a bird identification app. It's free. It will take you through various ways of identifying a bird. It does a really good job. It's aware of what birds have been reported locally, so it can constrain your choices to the expected species, which can be really useful. And the Sound ID feature that they added in the last couple of years is really a game changer. If you've got that running in the field, it's listening through your phone's microphone, and it's suggesting identifications for the birds it's hearing. Certainly, if you are not as familiar with the local bird vocalizations, or even if you are, it's hugely helpful. Uh, it's not 100% reliable. It's occasionally going to suggest things that are just wrong, or it's going to fail to hear birds that you can actually hear with your ears that it's not confident enough to identify. But it's really great. It's really, really helpful. And then the eBird app on the right, this is how you can enter an eBird checklist in the field while you're birding. These are both free. They're both great. I'm, way down the eBird rabbit hole. I'm a huge fan of eBird, and it's really transformed my own birding. If you are not recording your sightings in eBird, that's fine, but think about it. It is fun. And then you have the access to all the data on all the birds you've seen, and you can break it down in different ways, and it's really enjoyable. And you're also then contributing to the, huge citizen science project that is eBird, where your sightings will contribute to our knowledge of bird population trends and can be useful for conservation decisions. Okay. Yeah, I need to go quicker, go more quickly. So Bird Talk. If you use eBird, if you are a fan of eBird, I want to give a quick plug for Bird Talk. Our own Steve Colwell, as if we own him, our local birder, Steve Colwell, has created this really amazing app that I find very, very transformative for my own eBird use. What you can basically do is you get this app. The app itself is free, but with an asterisk we'll talk about on the next slide. But it will allow you to talk to your app, and the app will record your eBird checklist for you and submit it when you're done. And it all takes place hands-free. You don't have to take your phone out of your pocket and tap at your phone. Um, and I wrote a testimonial that is actually part of the Bird Talk documentation. You can go read me gush about this more. And I just think it's the bee's knees, but I'm gonna keep going. But Bird Talk, yay, Bird Talk. Um, the downside with Bird Talk from a budget standpoint is to really use it effectively. The best hardware we have found is the Shox OpenComm 2 headset, which is a Bluetooth headset. It sits over your ears, and then the speakers that you're listening to are actually bone conduction that sit in front of your ears, which means your ear canal is left unobstructed. And this is really useful for birding because you can hear the birds perfectly clearly, but you can also hear the app talking back to you because you need to hear it repeat back to you what it thinks you have entered. So you're sure that you're entering the birds correctly in your eBird checklist. And it's got this noise canceling microphone that works really well, even in windier conditions or noisier conditions. It does a pretty good job. So you can talk to the app without having to yell out in the field, which makes you look somewhat deranged. But you don't have to. You can just talk quietly. No one needs to know that you're talking to your app. But it costs $160 for the headset. So the app is not really free in the sense that you're kind of in for an investment if you want to make use of it. Okay. And now I'm going to go to the last sort of broad category I want to talk about, which is photography. And, for decades of my birding career, really the next thing, and maybe the last thing I would have suggested you really needed was a spotting scope. If you were going for your more well-equipped, more substantial investment into your birding technology, that was the next thing to get. And a spotting scope, I'm sure, is still an important tool for a lot of birders. I have found myself that I rarely use my spotting scope these days because it has been almost completely replaced in my own birding practice by photography. Um, and just to give a really quick version of why I come down that way, a decent spotting scope, which again is like a single barrel, like a binoculars, except it's higher powered and it sits on a tripod. It's very useful for magnifying distant birds. So if you're looking at shorebirds or a sea watch or anything, birds of prey, anything where you've got birds that are very distant, you can't really get close to them. That extra magnification is huge and very helpful. Um, the downside is it weighs a lot. It's a big clunky thing you got to carry around with you. Um, it is very handy to have a spotting scope if you're birding in a group, especially at one of these places like a wetlands or somewhere where there's a lot of distant birds, because you can get the scope on a bird and then share the view with someone else who can come over and look through the scope. Um, but short of that, I find that I can get a lot of the effectiveness of that higher magnification that I get with my spotting scope from a camera. If you have a camera with a sufficiently high-powered, lens, you can basically get not exactly as good, but close to as good a view of a distant bird just by looking through the viewfinder of the camera, by snapping a photo and then maybe zooming in on the photo as you look into the eyepiece of the camera. Um, and the camera's a lot lighter, and I want to have the camera anyway because it helps me document rarities, which is the big plus. I found as I got more avid in my birding and I started wanting to actually you know, compete and keep score and I mean, compete in a low key, friendly way, but to keep score and to try and get more birds on my list, that it meant trying to identify birds I had traditionally ignored as too hard or just, not interesting enough. They became inherently interesting when I needed them for my list. So what the photography helped me do is, I was not experienced with these species necessarily. I wanted to share that I had seen them because I wanted to contribute to knowledge about bird distribution, but also because I wanted experts to be able to look over my shoulder, in effect, and tell me, did I really see that bird? And photography was the way that I found that I could do that. So it was very helpful for me from an educational standpoint. So I started off just, holding my phone up to my binoculars or to my spotting scope and digiscoping or digibinning a photo. And that's what these two photos show. Um, you know, it works. If you've already paid for the phone, it's essentially free. Uh, but the results are limited and it's, cumbersome and awkward, and you can't do it with a quickly moving bird very effectively, which led me to photography. So, and these days with digital photography, unlike when I started birding, 50 years ago, um, you can much more easily photograph birds in the field. And so there's a range of cameras that I've kind of upgraded my way through over the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. Um, the camera I started off with, the first sort of dedicated birding camera I got was an earlier version of this camera, the Panasonic Lumix FC80. Um, it's a so-called super zoom camera. It's a like a bridge camera. It's got a combined lens and camera body all in one unit. And it zooms so you can extend the lens and get higher magnification, which is really useful for birds. Has autofocus. It's pricey. Cameras are expensive. Birding cameras have become, birding suitable cameras have become less expensive. There are less expensive options available than this, but I don't have experience with them, so I'm not really talking about them. Again, all of my cameras I bought for birding, I think I have bought used. Like you can buy a used camera and get a substantial discount. A lot of times it's like new or like new condition. It's close to new, but you save a significant amount of money. Um, so I started off with a camera like this. And you can get distant, birds that are not going to show up in any magazine or anything. It's not great as photography, but very useful for documentation purposes and learning and identifying, did I really see what I thought I was seeing? And being able to freeze that motion and really study it and, study it with my field guide open in front of me was really helpful. And, under the right conditions, if the lighting is right, and as you learn more about how to photograph the birds, you can get decent looking photos, even with a relatively inexpensive camera like that. So these are examples of photos I took with my FC80. And then the next thing I moved up to, I think Adrian O'Loughlin had a Sony RX10 Mark IV. that he was using, and he was talking up to me in the field, and I thought, that sounds pretty slick. That sounds very slick. Um, so I went ahead and I upgraded to that, and I was very happy with it. It's a great camera for birding. Again, it's all in one. It's pretty compact. It's pretty lightweight. You can carry it throughout your birding without really weighing yourself down. It's got a great autofocus, really fast, really effective autofocus. Um, a very nice lens, for a bridge camera like this. Uh, Pricey, again, it's kind of like binoculars. You can pay more for photography, and you can pay a lot more for photography. You can pay a lot more than I've ever paid, and you will get something in return for that. It's just, up to your individual budget where you stand on that kind of question. Um, I see in the chat Douglas mentioned, is BirdTalk supported on Android? And I believe it is not currently. So that is something that if you run into Steve out birding, ask him about, hey, we're going to be able to get BirdTalk on Android. Currently, it is iPhone only, is my understanding. Okay, so but the Sony RX10, really loved that camera. Had a lot of good experiences with it. Um, Here's some photos I took with my RX10. Just a really good birding camera. I can't really say enough about it. Uh, very good autofocus. Very good at like focusing on a distant speck in the sky. Like if I could pick out a speck in the sky, the camera could get focus and get an image of it. And often, if I did everything right, an identifiable image. So I really appreciated that about it. Um, but couldn't stick with that. So then I moved on to a mirrorless Canon body, the R7, with a separate lens, the Canon 100 to 500 zoom lens, because I saw a lot of, looking through all the photos in eBird, you can click through to the Macaulay Library page, and most of the time you can see what equipment the person used because it's there in the data associated with the photo. And a lot of the really nice looking photos I saw, they were using a setup like this. So eventually, I went ahead and pulled the trigger on this. And again, bought used, so it was not this pricey. These are new prices. Um, but used it for a couple of years and was very happy with it. It's a great setup. Um, it's heavier than the RX10 was, the previous camera I carried, but not so heavy that I couldn't, actually carry it all day and be happy with it. Um, and I mean, you're limited by your own abilities more than anything else. Like if you know how to take good photos, you can take very good photos. There are professional photographers who use that setup. Um, and so I found it, yeah. And Doug asks, is mirrorless considered a plus? And the benefit you get from the mirrorless camera is, or at least one of the benefits, and I'm not an expert on this, but um, it means the autofocus, you can get these really cool features where since the camera is mirrorless, the sensor is always processing the image, and you can have software that will actually focus on the bird's eye, right? It will if you have a, large enough bird that's prominent enough in the frame, uh, the autofocus will be able to track the bird's eye and keep the focus right there on the bird's eye. So that is one of the advantages of a mirrorless camera. It's lighter weight. It's got fewer moving parts. I don't know if I'm not a photography expert. I came to photography, mainly to document birds. And so, it's been a bit of a learning curve for me that I've certainly enjoyed, but I'm not a photographer. Um, and then I went ahead and upgraded one more time. I kept the same lens, but I got a new camera body, and this is the Canon R5. It's a full frame sensor rather than the cropped sensor of the R7. Uh, I'm not going to go into detail about it. It's more money, but what it has is it's mainly the thing I found is that the sensor is better the autofocus is substantially better. With the R7, I was, maybe like a 30 or 40% of the shots I was taking in bursts were actually well focused, and the others tended to be just a little bit soft, a little bit out of focus. Whereas with the R5, it's more like 80, 90% are sharp and in focus. And I attribute that to the faster sensor readout capability, which that's another meeting. We can talk about that in more detail. Um, but I really love the R5. And with that Canon 100 to 500 lens, very happy with it. So, if there's a bird in my field of view, I'm very comfortable that I at least have the equipment, maybe not the skill, but I have the equipment to do a good job of getting a good image of that bird. So that is basically it for my gear discussion. I what do I want to do? I want to stop sharing. So again, sort of a uh, quick jaunt through the topic, not an exhaustive discussion of it. I'm curious if there's anything other than what people have been putting in comments, if they have feedback about it. Um, you know, the photography side, it still kind of on some level is shocking to me how much I've been willing to spend on uh, bird photography equipment. Um, and I'm mindful of the fact that in a world in which there are a lot of uh, people who don't have access to just the resources to live healthy, happy lives, that it's maybe an indulgent thing to devote so much resources to my own personal fun. Something I think about. Uh, I don't know. On the topic of gear and budgets, that's something that comes to my mind. I don't really have anything profound to say about it, except I think about it. Lori, I see you've got your hand up. I don't know if Lori needs to be unmuted or Lori has the ability to unmute herself.
Thank you. Now I do. Could you comment, John, briefly on how you carry your camera vis-a-vis your bins?
Yes. So for me, I carry the camera via a sling. So it goes over one shoulder and then it hangs down at my hip. And so the camera and lens is sort of dangling at my right hip. The process I go through when I am going birding is the first thing I do is I put on the sling with the camera. Then I put on the Rick Young binocular harness over my shoulders on top of that. And I find that there is enough travel that I can then bring the camera up to my eye when I need it and put it away and it's out of my way. And then I can also raise the binoculars and do whatever I need to do with them. Uh, the one sort of tricky thing is that I find that if you want to get those nice low shots, so part of learning bird photography is you learn like, oh, really, you want to be at eye level with the bird. And so like if you're at the beach and you've got that long-billed curlew and it's very photogenic, you can stand comfortably and get like a ho-hum kind of shot, or you can lie down and get a shot like right at, curlew eye level that's really dramatic and cool looking. Um, but that can be tricky because I don't want to lie on the sandy beach with my binoculars. That sort of competes with my keeping the grit off the lenses, priority. Um, and I found that what I can do is I can actually, with the sling at its maximum length, like if I let it all the way out, I can sort of sit and I can put the camera down next to the sand and kind of flip the screen up because the screen can be pivoted. And rather than looking through the viewfinder, I can be looking at the external LCD screen and kind of shooting that way. So it's a little tricky. I'm looking down and I'm trying to keep the camera on the bird but it does get you nice low angle shots. That is one trick I have learned to do. Um, okay, so I'm going to assume we're good to go on to actual bird content. This has all been sort of meta, I'm talking about the gear, but really the birds are the whole point. So I'm really excited to talk about Bushtit. So if no one objects, I'm going to move on to part two, which is the Bushtit discussion. Let's see. How am I going to do that? Yeah. Yeah. Linda just said to me, Bushtit. In fact, she said that 9 minutes ago. So yeah, sorry. I get caught up and it gets exciting. Okay, let's do Bushtits. Yeah. Bring that over here and go into the slideshow mode. Okay. Courtney's, can I get a thumb? Do we have Bushtits on screen? Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about the Bushtit. I've lost track of the number of times we've talked about a bird species in one of these meetings, and I have said, really, guys, this is my favorite bird. But the bush-tit is a strong contender for my favorite bird. In a former existence, I wrote a book for O'Reilly and Associates, and they have this series of computer books. I wrote a book about the Perl programming language. And O'Reilly books had these animals on the cover, these sort of woodcuts of, like 18th, 19th century woodcuts of different animals. So every book has its own animal. So when we got to the point where I was talking to the editors and we were ready to go into production, and they said, "Oh, John, you don't get to choose your animal." Apparently, this comes up a lot in their discussions with their authors. Authors have very strong views about their animal. She's like, "But you can request, you can ask for things." And I asked for, if it was possible, a bush tit. I really wanted to have a bush tit on the cover of my O'Reilly animal book. Unfortunately, turns out there were no, royalty-free 18th, 19th century woodcuts of bush tits. But I did get an email back from the editor, and she said, "Really, John? You really want to be the bush tit book?" I guess, the name bush tit just seems kind of frivolous or silly, or like someone would not want to be associated with it. But I was like, "Oh, well, I definitely want to have the bush tit on the cover if I can get it." Alas, I did not get the bush tit on my cover. I'm very happy with the cover I got. It was very cool. It was a proboscis monkey. I am the proud author of the proboscis monkey book. Anyway, but bush tits, big fan of bush tits. Let's talk about them. Here is the range of the bush tit. They are non-migratory. They do some movement up and down in elevation in the more mountainous parts of their range. So they'll be, higher in the summer and lower in the winter. But other than that, they pretty much just stay put. They don't travel long distances. As you can see, they're a Western North American species down into Mexico and Central America. There are 11 members of this family, the Aegiathalidae, sort of. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right. Aegiathalidae, the long-tailed tits. There are 11 species worldwide. 10 of them are in the Old World. There's a few in Europe, and then there's a bunch in Asia, and there is one in the Americas, and we are lucky enough to have it. And they are tiny. A tiny long-tailed fluffy gray ball of a bird is its first sentence in the eBird page discussing it. And yeah, they are tiny. Yeah, we'll talk about that more. But let's go on. I'm going to click through, and I think this will take us to that eBird page. With any luck, it will load. There we go. Now we're looking at the actual page. Because I want to kind of step through these photos. So, excuse me. They have several different groups or subspecies. This is the Pacific group. This is the one that we have around here. This is a male. Some of you probably know already how you can tell that it's a male, but if not, I will save it as a surprise. Here's another male. This is the interior form. So if you were in the, eastern part of that range map that we were looking at, this is a version you might see. It's lighter, and it's got this sort of contrasting brown auriculars, brown on the side of the head. And then in the southern ones, you get this cool, the melanotis group, you get this cool black mask effect. And here's also a male from that group. And they're not all that way, but apparently there is this, I've never seen them firsthand, but there is a certain percentage of them in that southern population have this appearance. Here is a female of our local race. And we'll make this a quiz for the astute observers. How could we tell this is a female? What is the distinguishing characteristic? Anyone, shout it out if you're able to shout, or put it in chat. We will do this until you participate. Maybe you don't know. It is the eye, the iris. So the female bush tit is born with a dark iris like the male, but within a short time, just a few weeks, the young female bush tit develops this light colored iris. So if you see a flock of bush tits and you can see them nice and close, which you often can because they are the most fearless little balls of fluff you're ever going to see, check them out. And the ones with the light irises are females. Here's a female of the interior race. and a female of that Melanotis group, that more southern group. This one was in Guatemala. Here's a male from that southern group. This one was in Mexico City. And here we are back with our local version, our Pacific one. Here's a juvenile. So you can tell this is a young one because it has that little, and this is true of most songbirds, has that little bit of yellow at the gape. That's like, when the baby bird opens its mouth to make a target for the parent to stuff it full of food, it's bright yellow, which is like a thing that triggers the parent to stuff it full of food. And on those very young birds, you can see a little bit of yellow there at the gape. And this is a group of bush tits, two females on the left, two males on the right. And they're engaging in this characteristic bush tit behavior of huddling. They huddle. So bush tits, as I was saying, are very small. In fact, there was a local birder who I think was attributing this story to another local birder. This is going back in the day, many years ago. But this other local birder claimed that bush tits are mostly air and fluff and feathers. And if you took all that away, that people think, oh, the Allen's hummingbird is our smallest local bird species. But in fact, if you take the fluff into account, the bush tit is actually smaller than an Allen's hummingbird, that it's less massive. So I remembered that story and I researched it in preparation for this meeting. And I'm sorry, but it is not true. I don't want to malign old wives. That's an old wives. It's a tale. That is a fanciful claim. An Allen's hummingbird weighs about 3 grams. A bush tit weighs, I don't know, like 4.5 grams. So bush tits are a little bigger than a hummingbird, but not much. And anyway, but I think, they're cute and adorable and everybody loves them. So of course, people invent stories to make claims about how special they are because they really are just so adorable. But like hummingbirds, they have a real problem because of their tiny size. Their surface area to mass ratio, like they lose heat very readily. Like, the smaller you are, the harder it is for you to retain heat. So hummingbirds famously, have to eat all this high energy food all day, and they have to actually estivate. They have to go into a torpor at night where their body temperature reduces and their metabolism, their metabolic rate reduces, just so they don't starve to death before morning. And similarly, bush tits have this insane energy budget. They have to eat 80% of their weight in insects, it's their primary food, every day. Or if they're not getting that much food, they will lose weight and decline. So one of the things they do, one of the adaptations they have, and this is true of all the Agithalidae, all the long-tailed tits in the old world and with the bush tit, is they have this behavior of huddling. They they are very gregarious. They hang out in big flocks, or 10 to 20 birds, which is a lot of bush tits, and they will roost, or even just in the course of their day when they're not actively feeding, they will form a little ball. They will perch together, crowded together like this. It's a thing they do, and it is a way to conserve heat. So I think that's very cool. The first time I saw it was in our apple tree in our backyard. And I didn't know about this. I'm like, these bush tits are like making a little bush tit ball in our tree in the evening as they all come in and settle in for the night. And it's the coolest thing. And I've seen it a few other times since then. And it's just very, very cool. Okay, let's keep going with our bush tits. Okay, here's another bush tit. Excuse me. A male, as you can tell from its dark iris, and a female staring me down. Bush tits really are fearless, and it's one of the things that I appreciate about them. They're so small and they're so apparently defenseless, but they are not, you know, flying away to the treetops or disappearing whenever you come by. They are in your face. They are in that foliage. They tend to be in the outer parts of trees or bushes because that's where the leaves are that they're gleaning insects from. That's what they're doing almost all the time. And they will come right by you and go right past you, and they could care less. They are focused on their task. And again, I just like the look that this one had on her face. She just got that sort of ferocious bush tit look. I think they're so cute. Of course, if I were a small insect, I would think they were terrifying, as I'm sure they are to small insects. Another female in some saltbush. And a male. Again, more bush tit feeding. They do this thing where they hang upside down as they're gleaning, which is fun to see. So this was interesting. So a lot of birds, at the right time of year, this is in January, they'll start to have this kind of gunk around their face, like they're probing into flowers that have nectar. I don't think the bush tits are eating nectar. I think they're shoving I think this one was shoving it. I'm guessing. I don't actually know. But I suspect from my reading up on bush tits that they're not really eating nectar. They're really interested in the insects that maybe are interested in the nectar. And so that's why they're probing these flowers and getting this gunk on their face. And it looks like even a little pollen in there too, along with the nectar that has daubed its face. Um, this is the best photo I have of a bush tit huddle, and it's not a very good photo. I apologize. After all my big talk about photography in the first half of the class, you think I could get a better photo of a bush tit huddle one of these days. Um, but I have this fun video, so I'm going to play this video. We can watch these bush tits huddling. So for my reading about this, it is the goal of the bush tits to be in the middle of the huddle. So they will, do their best to kind of worm their way into the center. Anyway, we'll go on. Whoops, no, we'll start over again. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Okay. Oh, and I also wanted to talk about their nests because their nests are really interesting. So this is a bush tit nest, and the bush tit is emerging near the top. It's a female. She's emerging from the top of this nest where there's a little hole, but then it makes this pouch, sort of like an oriole, makes a pouch nest of a similar kind of, shape. It's built largely with spider webs and soft vegetation. And then they will line it with softer stuff like feathers and things on the inside. And the baby bush tits will be down here in the bottom. And it's very effective. It's very hard for predators to get at them. In fact, if you read up on the Birds of the World, article about bush tits, there's relatively little known about the first few weeks or the first week and a half-ish of bush tit life because it's just very hard to see what's going on down in there. They're very well concealed inside their pendulous nests. And I wanted to link through to, again, this is, so if you're on eBird, you can, look at photos and you can use the filters to say, oh, only show me the ones that have been flagged as nest photos. So here are some, this is actually a mislabeled, like that's not a nest, that's a bird. It's a young bird, but it's out of the nest. But here's a bush tit at its nest opening. Another bush tit with a nest. Bush tit removing a fecal sac. So if you've got a nest full of baby bush tits and they're in there pooping, you don't want to have your nest fill up with poop. So the parent birds, as with many songbirds, will remove the fecal sac from the nest and dispose of it outside the nest. You will come across bush tit nests, they just kind of look like this, and if you ever wondered what that thing was that you found in the bushes, like 8 or 10 inches long, it was a bush tit nest. Okay, let's resume. Do I have any more? I have one more video because this I thought was so cute. They will do this dense huddling flocking behavior not just when they're roosting for the night, but also when they're bathing. And I have seen this. I've seen bush tits do this at a bird bath, and it's very fun. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and declare victory in the Bushtit presentation. That's it for Bushtits. I don't have a lot of content, but again, it was only half the meeting, so maybe that's okay. If anyone has any fun Bushtit stories to share, you're welcome to share them. Decent chance we'll see. Oh, I see Lori did answer the question about how you tell the males from the females. Lori knew the answer. Yeah, so if you come out on Saturday to the Carpinteria Bluffs, to the Viola Fields parking, there's an excellent chance we will come across some bush tits. We can have personal interaction, not just via YouTube videos. Um, I don't know. I always feel like I'm getting away with something cool when I come across bush tits. And there's that thing, when you're keeping an eBird checklist, you want to estimate the numbers of birds. I know for a fact that, I am way too conservative in my estimate of bush tit numbers because I'll base it on what I can hear and see, and I'll say, oh, there's maybe 5 bush tits there. And then they'll do that thing where they cross over from one bush to another. So they cross the open space and you can sit there and just wait and count them. And I'm like, no, there were not 5 bush tits there. There were 20 bush tits there. I dramatically underestimate bush tit numbers until I get a good chance to see them in flight. Anyway, they still probably are my favorite bird. They're right up there. I mean, we could argue different birds, but bush tits have to be in the finals. They have to be in the list. Okay, well, that was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was fun for some of you. I hope to see you on Saturday, and I look forward to Tom and Laurel being back, so I don't have to abuse the Purcells and make them be the meeting co-hosts. But thank you very much to the Purcells for that, and thank you to everybody else who showed up and participated. That's it. That's our meeting. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting over. And it's just too dark out to go birding, but we'll go birding on Saturday. We'll make up for it. So thank you, everybody, and I will see you